start off by saying thanks for, you know, your time and interviewing and answering these questions that I have prepared for you. So
Awesome.
yeah, obviously we're talking about, challenges of the job seeking process. Yeah, I just kind of want to like start off and, you know, just kind of hear about how the process has been for you so far and what it's been like on your end.
Yeah, so I mean, I quit my job because I hated it, and I fully am embracing unemployment. So it's uh it's been fun. The
Okay.
job seeking, just my time because I haven't really focused too much of an effort on job seeking itself. So I've been having fun, which is
Okay.
a good thing. When I do job seek, it's like it's for very very specific jobs. So I just have a couple of alerts set up for when those job postings happen.
Mhm.
And when those job postings happen, I just apply to them very quickly. Kind of the best thing that's been the most helpful was I had a resume service, just redo my resume, so I didn't have to worry about that, which saved me a lot of time and heartache. So I thought that was like the most positive thing that has come out of this, was
Mhm.
just using that, and it's just saved me so much. So I don't really worry about tinkering my resume because I know it's good, right?
Mhm.
So so that's been nice. And mostly I'm applying on websites online. Haven't really got much traction there. But then like I've been using my friends' networks to actually get a good amount of contacts. So it's been going well.
Cool. Um, Friends network. So, how have you been? What kind of conversations have you been having with your friends to work on this network together or tap into that network?
Well, really, it's my main friend Pat has been pretty instrumental. He said that I should be considering investment banking, and then he just connected me with his old boss, who he had a really great relationship with. So it's been great, and his boss has been insanely helpful at connecting me with different people, and
Mhm.
then hopefully maybe even hiring me. We'll see.
That sounds promising. Good luck there.
Yes,
Do
yes.
you think it would have been different? Do you think it would have been different if you hadn't connected or started off the bat connecting people? That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I think for me as someone who's worked on a recruiting operations team, like, and just was in the recruiting world, I now know that like hard way previously, right? Like the
Mhm.
easy way is actually doing the networking and doing the talking with people, because it's actually how things get done in the world, right? And so like just applying using job boards and all that other stuff, I think it's a pretty ineffective way of actually getting yourself hired, especially for the job that you actually really really want.
Mhm.
It's also hard to understand like what jobs are actually the right fit for you. So I think like actually having conversations is the best thing. And one of the things my director had said when I was leaving was he's like you'll have a job in about 150 conversations, right? So he's like that's in my experience like usually how it happens, and those can be conversations about the job hunt. Those can be conversations about networking. Those can be interviews. Those can be like where to look. But he's like usually it just takes you talking to a lot of people to find out what really connect what really what job like will land for you and you'll be connected with. And I think that I thought that was sound advice. It's like honestly I think the hard way is like sitting and waiting and then applying online and constantly tinkering your resume. I think the easy way is actually just talk to people.
Mhm. And like as you've been having these conversations, how have you been feeling after each one?
Better after each one. Like usually, some of them are disappointing. Where you follow up on a lead and then nothing happens, but that is the way the world works.
What do you do?
But usually, people are nice enough to actually to respond to like a request for just a quick chat or an informational interview. So it's been helpful.
when you run into that kind of no response, like what do you do then, or how do you kind of do to keep moving, or what are your
So
actions?
I think it's just like it. You just have to move on. Like you just have to. Like it's just like if something's a dead end, like obviously it's just a dead end. You just have to find another connection that maybe is as good or fruitful, or could be as fruitful as this one could have been, right?
Okay.
And sometimes it's like asking the right questions, right? It's like asking like, oh, so like, okay, if someone doesn't have any opportunities, you can ask the follow-up question of like, oh, do you know who might be looking, who has opportunities, who's looking for someone, you know? And asking those kind of questions usually help help lead, help get you additional connections, I think.
Why do you think it's um, sorry, different question. When did you realize that this or when did you realize it was harder to kind of sit at it alone?
I think it's just like this experience is like the last time I was unemployed. I thought it was pretty hard. I was kind of doing that on my own, and then this experience like is just completely different. It could be because I'm more mature, but I think it's just because I understand like what are the things that are actually effective versus like what are the things that just are useless. Like most of the times, like I do apply to jobs online, and I think that it's mostly useless. But I understand that like it's still a thing you can do, so I still do it.
Okay.
But like before, I would just keep doing it that way, and then it wouldn't be working. I'd just be sad.
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. What would you say then is most motivating about having the or your new way, this new way of job searching, this different way of job?
It just seems like there's more actual feedback in the process, right? So
Mhm.
I think when you apply to these like resume black holes, that it's really hard to actually understand what is happening and what you can change. Whereas like when you actually start talking to people, you actually start finding out what they and kind of
Mhm.
deciphering like the secret code of like what these job postings actually mean, right?
Mhm.
The job postings can mean like a variety of things that like, oh man, maybe it's just like a job posting that they've already identified an internal candidate and they just need to get around like equal opportunity like protection. Or maybe it's like maybe like what you thought this job meant is something completely different, and
Mhm.
then a person will guide you to something that fits your skill set.
Okay. And what kind of people are you having these conversations with? Is it um, recruiters, friends who have jobs? Um,
It's usually friends who have jobs and kind of their bosses or their bosses' bosses.
mhm.
Um, I haven't really talked to that many recruiters to be honest, and it's different because I'm also looking for like a very specific kind of work. So I mean, it's not like I'm casting like a wide net. If I was
Mhm.
casting a wide net, I'd probably talk to a lot more recruiters because they could just see what my skill set might align to.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like what something that's different about my approach. That like if I was casting a wide net, I would definitely talk to a lot more recruiters and headhunters,
Mhm.
and then choose from what they've offered. But here it's more like I've already made the choice, and it's just how do I actually like uh like get that.
Yeah, yeah. So you are looking for very specific work. How do you feel about other job seekers?
And what I feel like I'm insanely privileged over many job seekers, right? Because like I realize I have a great network. Um, I kind of got a great experience working for Apple,
Mhm.
and I think that bodes well for my just my resume actually does look good. So I think that helps me a lot, and I'm privileged in that sense. I think I'm also privileged in the sense of like I actually know sort of what I kind of want to do, and I think that helps a lot, right? So I think when you don't sort of understand what jobs are good for you or fits for you, I think it gets a lot harder, and then it's harder to like to navigate the world because you're looking at so many different things. It's so hard to actually find out what things mean.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that gives me more peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and just helps me. I don't know.
Okay. In that being said, like, so you are feeling like you have, you know, a good starting base, a good network, and
Yep.
you under, you have a feeling that you have an advantage over other job seekers. What about, I mean, how helpful has it been, I guess, connecting to the people in your network specifically for this job versus people who weren't in your industry, in this industry?
Can you say that one more time? I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding what you're asking.
Yeah. So the people in your network that you were connecting with, was
Yep.
it automatically, are these people who were already in the specific kind of job role that you were looking for, specific industry that you were looking for, or were they more in different areas, in different industries, or how?
It's mostly in a similar industry, and then like it's kind of like you just the more you talk to people, you start understanding like so I got interested in a specific type of investment banking because my friend Pat, that's what he does. So I was like, oh, that sounds great. Like, can I have that? And so he's like, yeah, let me see what we can do for you. And then slowly but surely, like I realized that there are people in my network who know people who do investment banking, and so I start talking to them, and then slowly but surely I can get closer to kind of the people I need to be talking to. So I would say like I was fortunate enough to have some people who like direct connections into kind of the work I was looking for, and then also like be able to leverage some of the other people who have like husbands or relatives or friends that work in the industry, and then I was also able to talk to some of the people I went to school with who've been doing it for some time now, and also connect with them. Does that answer your question? I hope it does.
Yeah. What
Okay.
kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to do that?
Who wants to? What do you mean? When you say that, what do you want?
Who wants to start connecting with people towards that industry, towards something more specific?
Oh, I would say um, the questions I think that are really helpful, I think in any profession, is finding out who does it the best, right? I think that's always been fruitful, right? Because then you start finding out who, like for me, it was like who's for this specific type of investment banking, like which companies are doing the biggest deals, who does the most deals, and like understanding that the lay of the land that way is a nice foray, and then you're able to start asking questions, right? And then I think for things that aren't investment banking, it's also really helpful because like say if you want to be a cook, it's like well who cooks the food I want to cook, like who is the closest who does that the best, and then see if you can just ask to talk to them and chat about it, because you're super interested in it, and then you can talk to them like, oh, who do you think does it the best? What would you do in my position? How would you break in? And I think people are genuinely helpful. I think it's kind of about kind of doing some legwork yourself about finding out like, okay, so you're interested in something. Now that you're interested in finding out like who are the movers and shakers of that thing you're interested in it. How can you talk to them? And then can you talk, if you can't talk to them, can you talk to like people who are still in there, and then maybe they can direct you to different places.
Yeah. I think I have a feeling that would inspire a lot of people. And I'm really curious about kind of your first go at the job hunt compared to now. Um, because you said the first one was a little bit more, um,
Yeah, I think the first one was bad because it's really, I didn't have a network that I could really exercise, right? So my network was really young, right? And really green because I had just gotten I was a year out of college. So I think it's a lot harder then, right? Because in that specific time period, it's companies have very specific recruiting cycles for recent college grads.
mm,
And I was kind of out of that for some of them. And I think that puts you at a disadvantage. And then also I didn't sort of know what I wanted.
mm,
And I think those two things combined made it very difficult, right? Because I didn't know that I should be exercising. I should be having conversations. I know I needed to do that, right? That would have helped me then. But I think also it's like having a network that was very young doesn't help me either. It's like, so now like I'm 3 years out of school, so like people are pretty settled. They have good relationships with people who make hiring decisions. They understand what's going on. They themselves can influence hiring decisions, and I think that itself is super helpful. That's the maturity of the network. But mostly it's just like the willingness to just like understand that like not like talking to people and getting hired that way is like the easiest way to get hired versus like toiling over like finite details of your resume and making that perfect, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's like the harder way to do it because it's chances are in some companies like a recruiter will never ever see your resume, and then even if they do, they then just screen it very quickly because they're a sourcer and they're screening hundreds of resumes. So it's pretty difficult. And usually, like people are more charming in person than they are on paper, so it's like a disadvantage.
mm. Um, I'm actually really also I find it really interesting that you say that you are looking for a specific job. Um, how has that been different for you in this round versus the last round?
It's been really different because like I understand the kind of work I would like, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm just able just to say no, and I'm privileged enough to be able to do that, and I think that that's like a huge thing where like I find myself in a great position where like I've saved money. I'm not hurting for work. I can pay my own health insurance. Like I think that helps a lot. And it's made it's just I've just had more focus, right? I think it's hard to really be effective in networking conversations if you don't know what you want to do because then you just seem aimless and the conversation is not as directed and also not as deep, right? Because like if one day you're interested in investment banking, the next day you're interested in project management, like you tend not to be able to ask as like interesting or provocative questions that really help you build rapport with the person you're talking to, right? It's a harder thing to do, but like if you know the landscape and you know what you're interested in, it becomes easier because the more and more you have these conversations, the more and more you learn about whatever job market or industry that you want to be in. And that makes you sound like an even better candidate because you're knowledgeable already, right? So it's like, I think that's helpful. And I think like when you're looking at different things, you just have to spread your time all over the place. And things are just harder.
Sorry to jump in for a second, but it looks like your video has actually dropped. Can you try just turning your video off and on again? See if that, yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Awesome, thanks. And actually, on that note, I had a question for you. One of the things that we've been hearing a lot in talking about this is that people definitely from all age groups and all sort of levels of experience, some of them have what you're saying with, you know, oh, I'm really excited about this job search, but a lot of them have just a lot of frustration and a lot of, frankly, depression, not in the clinical sense usually, but just general depression with the way the job search is going. So I wondered, have you been there at all in this job search? And I mean, prefacing, like, this isn't something we really admit, particularly as a guy. This is something we really don't admit. So I know it's a little weird to share about that, but it's part of what we're looking into. So that's why I want to just call it out.
I think, for me, I think like the differences between my last job hunt, which was like super depressing and insanely frustrating, and this one is like, it's the feedback, right? And so like, I found that when I'm actually talking to people more, I actually understand what the feedback is. Like, oh, like I actually understand that like I'm completely out of cycle. I'm too old in a lot of cases for these jobs I'm looking for. I'd have to start at the bottom, and that's really hard to do as someone who's an older candidate. So things like that, I understand like what are the things affecting my candidacy a lot more because I'm having those conversations. And I think that transparency is insanely helpful in dealing with like, frustrations, right? So yeah, I think that's super helpful. But I have been frustrated at times here because like I started getting to like the limits of my my network. Like I almost got to the limits of my network like a week ago, where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know who I'll be able to tap for people to talk to. And I think and then I was able to reach back out to someone. They had different opportunities, and so that was reassuring. But had that not happened, it would have been frustrating because I was starting to reach like the fringes of my network for this thing. But then there's always more people to talk to, and I could have just started cold calling people and just writing cold introductions to people on LinkedIn, which is a thing. That was my next move, which would probably been super frustrating as well. But I would say it hasn't happened to me this much now, just because I've been lucky. I've been lucky that before I was able to get traction before I actually reached the fringes of my network.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And as you were, so sort of when you were in that cusp between, I think I've exhausted my network, and this person reaching back to you and saying, hey, I have a whole bunch of people you could talk to. What did you do, or did you do anything for that matter, to sort of deal with that emotion that was coming up?
I started to think about like maybe this isn't right for me, and maybe I should consider other alternatives, which I did. Like, I mean, I started considering like maybe it's actually a good idea to get a graduate degree, and I can just go into this later. So I did consider other alternatives, but then I tried to just keep reaching out to more fringes on my network, and kind of some people in my network that I deprioritized because I didn't think they'd be that much helpful. I tried reaching out to them as well, but luckily, like, I didn't have to do too much of that before something else came. But in the moment, it was just frustrating. I went back to the job boards and said, like, okay, let's see what's actually out there. Let's see what I can do there. And like maybe I can take my mind off of it by just doing the tried and true stuff.
Definitely. So then I guess one thing to follow up, how involved have your friends been, and maybe I should say friends that aren't investment bankers, because it sounds like you've been tapping your network a lot, but how much have you been just, you know, calling up your friends and being like, dude, this sucks, or, you know, this is amazing, but...
Yeah, I would say not too often because again, like at the end of the day, like my employment situation is completely my choice. Am I doing? I'm lucky enough to kind of like doing it while I was doing it. So I think it's a little different in that way, right? So because like I very much tried to put the fun in fun employment. So like I job hunt and then take these sort of calls very like maybe like less than 5 hours a week just because I'm able to do so much other stuff. I'm not too worried about it, right? Because I'm like something will happen, and if it doesn't happen, I'll just like widen the net. And then at the end of the day, I'm pretty confident that if I kind of go back to the industry I was working in before, I would be able to find a job easily. Um, it's just that that's not the job I wanted to do, right? So I think it's like at the end of the day, I know I will find something. And I think that's like a good peace of mind to have because I feel like I am a talented person. I know how to like add value. So at the end of the day, I think it's like if I don't get this specific job I'm looking for, I feel confident that I'll be able to find something that also fits my needs, maybe not as well. It's like I guess a blind or naive confidence.
Cool.
So it's like talking to my friends too much. If anything, my friends always ask me how it's going. I'm like, oh, it's going okay. It's going okay. I'm enjoying my time off.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that I have are, yeah, I think those are all the questions that I have that I know of. Eric, help me out here if I should ask any more questions. We're running up on time too.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the end of the time that we had said. So I think the other thing I would say, the other thing, the other thing that I was wondering about is how do you look for feedback outside of those conversations you're having, if at all?
Feedback on like this and like
On the
I
job
guess I don't
search.
look for feedback. I say don't actually look for feedback that often, other than those in those conversational settings, because like I feel good about my resume, right? I feel like the resume might not truly be the problem, right? Because I did have like I think it's great. I think I had a great resume writer write it, and I think it looks great. So I've kind of just like it's really like those conversations are the primary way of getting that feedback because I don't. Yeah, that's really it. The conversations, the primary way of getting those feedback.
Cool. And then
You'll have to walk your resume through. At one point in time, like you'll be in a situation where you're walking your resume through someone, and then they'll give you feedback based on it.
gotcha. Cool.
And like I also think it takes a keen ear too, right? Because I think like the feedback isn't delivered as like, oh, I was very impressed by this, and this, and very taken aback by this, and this. It's kind of like following their line of questioning. Like, what are the things they're asking questions about specifically, and then did you were they satisfied with your answer, right? So like, so the questions are pretty pointed, where it's just like, oh, how good are you at this? How good are you at this? Like the one I just had with a director, which is literally like, how good are you at math? How good are you at Excel? How good are you at PowerPoint? And they asked me an interview question. So it's like very straight to the point. Or they'll say like, oh, I really like that you code. Like that's a good thing. Like, I mean, that's like not. I think that's actually a really good example. But some of the other ones are just like, based on what they ask you questions on, I think it's helpful.
Cool. And how would you say, if at all, you seek support in your job search?
Talk to my dad. It's nice to talk to my dad. He's just older, wiser, and has done this many times. Usually, when I get down about my job search, I usually try to find someone who's older, right? Because I think there's a more calming, soothing thing. Because I think someone who's out of my peer group, age-wise, older that is, tends to understand that like this is just part of life, and that like it just things will get better and you'll find something. And then like, because I think if I talk to people who are at my age, it's either that like they've just forgotten how terrible like the job search is, or like they have the same complaints. And I think like to me like the complaint sessions aren't as helpful as like it's better. It'll get better. Here are strategies you should take.
Awesome. I think that's everything else I had.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks again, Dan, for your time. Good luck
No worries.
on your job, your unemployment time.
Yeah, totally. I'll probably have to ask you more about how this project's going, but I've got to run in a little bit. But I'd love to talk to you more about kind of what you both are doing here.
For sure. Thanks. And thanks, Greg, for.
No problem. And yeah, Dan, thanks. It's very helpful, and we really appreciate you being okay with recording it, because then we can show it to other people going through not the job search process, but the interview, how to interview process. So that's really helpful for us.
I do apologize for the kind of rescheduling. That's my bad. Sorry about that. So I thank you all for being flexible.
No worries. It is a big part of this process is rescheduling, sometimes even right at the last minute. So it's all good.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time.
All right. See ya. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
And do you want to stay on for a minute?
Yeah.
Cool.
Now I'm just kind of nervous because I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be shown to people.
Don't be nervous. I mean, you know, anyone who's watching this is basically in your shoes right now, if not even earlier. Like, they may not even know as much as you do about research at this point. So it's all good. So the biggest two pieces of feedback that I have with the interview is, one, great job being open and creating connection with him and creating rapport.
Mm.
He was definitely, you know, someone who was comfortable talking to you. You know, if you interview someone and they're not comfortable talking to you, you'll get 1 or 2 word answers, things like that. He was giving you descriptions, that kind of thing. So great job on that.
Okay.
Second thing I would say is, did you notice that he was really sticking to a lot of positive emotions?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of every time you would ask a question, he'd sort of veer back into this like, life is good, you know, everything's awesome, or what's the Lego movie? Everything is awesome. Like, he would just kind of go like, how are things not great? Oh, they're awesome. Like, what do you find doesn't work very well? Oh, they're awesome. So particularly for American men, it's very challenging to admit weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was part of the reason that I not only called that out explicitly, but also, since I'm a man, I said, this is something we don't typically talk about, and it's a little uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to have that part of the conversation. And his video was dropping in and out, so we weren't able to get like faces from him the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But did you notice how his body language changed a little bit from before that to after that?
No, actually, I didn't. It wasn't paying attention to body language. Okay.
That's all right. That's part of the reason you record this and you use video rather than just audio.
That's crazy. Awesome.
Yeah. So his body language, I can model it a little bit. I have to move back a little. So his body language before was, yeah, you know, things are good. He wasn't bouncing quite this much. That's a little more my personality, but he was nodding a lot. Yeah, I'm really putting the fun in fun employment. He said that, I think, 3 times. And then when I brought that stuff up, he just dropped a little bit. So he wasn't quite as like looking up. He wasn't quite as high notes in his voice like this. He was a little more, yeah, sometimes it's frustrating. My last job search was, I struggled with depression. And it's not that like you want to get them there in an interview, but in this interview you did, because one of your hypotheses was that job seekers feel isolated, and your other one was they're unsure how to spend their time meaningfully. So to get at sort of proof or disproof of those, you have to go to the negative, because both of those are negative. If your hypothesis had been
should I make more positive hypotheses then?
No, not at all. So for one thing, negative hypotheses are usually easier because it's easier to design a solution to them. If I say, if my hypothesis is women have lots of dates, then if I prove it, I don't really know what I'm going to build as a tool or as a product or anything, because all I know is that they don't have a problem. So in general, your hypothesis should be something negative because you're looking at a need. If it's a positive, like, these people have lots of dates, there's no need there. So feeling isolated, there's a need to not feel isolated. Feeling unsure how to spend their time meaningfully, there's a need to feel how to be sure they're spending their time meaningfully. Does that make sense? So hypotheses are almost always, I guess I could say, instead of thinking of it as negative or positive, these are hypothesized needs. Sorry?
Challenging, not negative.
That too. But they're needs. They're, if things were good, why would they need the product that you're trying to potentially build? So no, it's okay. And so you wanted to try and get at some of the negative emotions. And you will see sometimes that people are just Pollyannas. They're just like, everything is awesome, nothing is wrong. And that doesn't mean that that's not true, but you do want to try and probe past the just, everything is awesome, and get to, what are you afraid of? What are you worried about?
What are you afraid of and worried about? Okay.
Yeah. And then, actually, there was one other thing. I thought it was really interesting. I asked him at the end, how do you seek feedback? Which is actually a little bit of a formal way of saying it, and I was worried that would trip him up.
Yeah.
And I was actually expecting him to say, I don't, or I do in those conversations.
But then he said his dad.
Well, so that was actually the really, really formal one that I asked afterwards, which is like, how do you seek support? And yeah, he said his dad, which was so interesting because I felt like you and I had both asked him a couple different ways about like, who do you talk to about the job search? And I forget which one of us did, but one of us, I think, used those words. Who do you talk to about the job search? And he said, I basically don't. So it's kind of an interesting illustration that sometimes you just got to ask what seems like the same question 2 or 3 different ways, so that eventually they'll hear it as this other thing that you're trying to get at. Because they keep saying, he kept saying, like, I just have conversations with people in my network, or people my network refers me to. And, I don't talk to peers because all they do is complain. And, I don't really do any other pieces of feedback. Oh, but I talk to older people like my dad who've been through the job search a lot. And that was clearly like emotional support, because he said,
he needs someone to tell him that things will get better.
Right. That's part of the process. That's life. It'll get better. That's emotional support. There's no, problem solving there. There isn't strategy. It's just, it's going to be okay.
But, okay, maybe this is like clinical of me, but wouldn't, talking to your network about how to strategize, that would be a type of support too.
Absolutely. And notice that he didn't say that when we asked, how do you get support? And for that matter, he also actually didn't mention the resume company or service or whatever that he used, which is very much a form of support. And if you look at the notes, he got a huge amount of support out of that. He said, I think 2 times, I'm not worried about my resume. They did it. They did a good job. I don't need to mess with it, tweak it, think about it. It's just great.
Mm-hmm.
So, honestly, almost the entire call was talking about how he gets support.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to ask it in probably 4 different ways, including at the end in a very specific sort of formal, or maybe I should say cold sounding way. And that was finally when we got the last one.
Do you think that's because also you like kind of called him out and like made him like talk about his like
Emotions?
the rough patches of even the good round?
I think so, but I think it's also very much that he doesn't think, at least not without us sort of prompting him, he wasn't thinking of any of the stuff that we talked about as support.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, talking to his network, that's not support to him. That's part of the job search.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be my guess anyway. And maybe the resume service, maybe he wouldn't call that support either. Maybe he'd call that like building your tools or something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even saying he's wrong. It's just we wanted to get at, how do you get emotional support in particular? And it just took asking that a few different ways to finally get an answer.
I think it'll be interesting to doing interviews and research interviews to kind of understand or just to pick up when like what our idea of support is and what who we're interviewing's idea of support is. It's all very, I guess, you never really know unless you keep asking questions. And I don't know, does it get easier with time when you pick out, we might have differences in definitions or content?
Yeah. So one of the things that you'll want to do is try and write down or make notes of the time codes and go back to find out exactly how he refers to some of the problems that you're interested in solving, which honestly, for the most part, he doesn't feel isolated and he isn't unsure. He is very sure about how to spend his time meaningfully. Mm-hmm. So he falls in the category of evidence to disprove both of these hypotheses. Mm-hmm. But I would actually say, before I tangent onto that, let me finish answering your question. So as you're going through, you'll want to make notes about the actual words people use to talk about these needs, if they have them, mm-hmm. because then that's what you use for your marketing copy for this. Hypothetically, if you built this website.
That'd be depressing words.
Well, not necessarily depressing. So it might be like, what did he say? I think he said something like, I'm tired of talking to my friends because all they do is complain. Mm-hmm. So maybe on the website it would say, tired of complaining to your friends, but know that you actually need advice. I don't know, I'm making it up, but you would use those phrases and those words because that's what's going to resonate with most people. If that's how they feel, and I said instead, do you feel like you talk about how bad the job search is going? Mm-hmm. People aren't going to resonate with that because it's just not the way that I'm saying it. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Cool. So the tangent I was starting to go on was, you remember I told you that you don't want to just ask things to prove your hypothesis. You want to not only ask things to disprove, but you also just want to ask about the general sort of area to see what they're doing because you might end up pivoting. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting in what he was talking about was his idea of his previous boss told him you'll have a new job after 150 conversations, not just interviews, but just talking about the job search. And I would actually go back and take some better notes of that time to get exactly what other examples he gave. And then also some of the stuff he said about really reaching out to his network and talking to people to try and figure out like, I know what I want. Can you connect me to someone who can, who can help me get that? I'm not saying you want to do this, but if every interview went this way, you might say, oh, we don't need a, get emotional support website. What we need is like a training program or some kind of course that basically sets the expectation of 150 conversations, helps you brainstorm how to get 150 conversations, and then keeps you accountable for walking through the process of reach out to some number of people each day, ask them how they could help you, and then, follow up 2 or 3 days later, and keeps track of like, okay, how many conversations have you had? What have you learned?
Job seekers.
Sorry?
Like a Fitbit for job seekers.
Very much so. And honestly, I don't think that's what you're going to end up developing, but that could be something you could pivot to if most of the conversations went this way. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you might also even find that the people who are, woe is me, I can't get any jobs, I hate my life, they might actually love that idea because it would give them something meaningful to put their time towards. So
I do, what I thought was really interesting, like specifically, I'm trying to, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I'm like looking ahead and, thinking about, okay, what would this solution look like, based on the research that I'm getting. And I kind of am thinking sort of like, I don't want people to commiserate or complain. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like, that doesn't help anything, right? But I do want people to feel better about themselves. And the only way that I have seen or like experienced is people working in teams. And that's when they feel like more motivated, I suppose. So it was more like connecting job seekers to be each other's teammates rather than like specifically like they're there. But they're like a nice pat in the back when things are rough is like what a team is for, sometimes.
Yeah.
And like,
yep.
But what I thought was interesting was what I'm hearing a lot is that like he has a specific job in mind, a specific goal, and that did show up on the survey, and that showed up while talking with another like interview. And I'm wondering if, like if that's how I could connect people, not like similar, but like, similar industries, similar like roles.
Yeah.
Just like personalize it a little bit more and establish a rapport.
Definitely.
I don't know.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting ways that you could take this. And again, this is the reason that you don't have super narrow interview questions about just, do you feel unsupported? Are you worried about doing the right things or working on the right things? You ask broader questions because, you've already seen some things that are a little different than you were thinking, and the next interview might bring you even further to a better idea, mind you, not to a worse one.
Okay. How do is this like downloadable, savable?
So once this finishes processing, I'll send you a link, and then I'm actually not sure if you'll be able to download it, but if you aren't, I know I am, so I can download it and then just send you a Dropbox link for it.
Ooh,
but it'll be an unlisted YouTube video, so you can also just go watch it at any time you want to.
Fancy.
Yeah.
Sounds
and
good.
That's part of what's nice about doing this is then you can go back, you could, if you were doing this with a client, you could share a video with the client. In general, if you were doing this with a client, you would actually want to cut the videos. So it's just, here's a 10-second clip from this person and followed by a 20-second clip from your second interview and that kind of thing. So they don't have to just like, here's 7 hours of video, have fun.
Yeah. Um, so wait, I'm curious, are there like random clients videos on YouTube, or is YouTube like,
Yeah, so I actually have a number of videos that I did for my client, often where my client was on the call as well, and they're unlisted videos in my YouTube account. So no one else can, I mean, I guess you could sit there and just type in random, YouTube URLs until you found one, but that would take probably a couple of millennia. So as long as no one can access my YouTube account, which since it's my Google account, there's no way I'm letting anyone access that. They're safe and they're still accessible to my clients. So they can say, oh, let me go back and view some of that footage that Greg did, the interviews Greg did with person A and B 2 years ago, and they're still up there.
and this is all through Google?
This is all stored on the YouTube servers, yeah.